When I discovered it, it was like a breath of fresh air for me, because suddenly a lot of the games I was sitting were ones that I would want to play.
The first game was a bit like, oh, okay. And then the second game, I was just like, what? This is crazy. What else is this program going to bring to my eyes?
The ones I find really impressive are the ones that look like a Pokemon game from 30 years ago that are 2D. And then it provides a really important alternative creative perspective on things.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Gaming the System, the podcast where three intersectional feminists examine gaming and games through a feminist lens. Today, I'm your host, Alex, and I'm joined by my friends Jem and Matt. Before we get started, if you want to support us, you can subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/gamingthesystem for some exclusive content. Or you can send us a one-off donation via PayPal to our email address, wearegamingthesystem@gmail.com. Hello and welcome to another episode. This week we're going to be talking about a gaming showcase known as Day of the Devs. It's themed a little bit like Day of the Dead, the Mexican festival. So it's got a lot of skulls and sort of Mexican flavour to it. But it's all about indie developers within the gaming world and the games that they are very excited to share with gamers and the community at large. I can't remember exactly when Day of the Dev started, but it's relatively recent. Certainly since the demise of E3, which used to be the gaming showcase that everyone knew and everyone paid attention to. If your game was on E3, it was probably going to be very popular. I wanted to do a deep dive into Day of the Devs because compared to some of the other more mainstream gaming showcases that we have, such as Summer Games Fest and the PlayStation ones for different consoles, it just feels more creative and appealing to me in terms of the games that it showcases, and I'm sure we'll discuss that a lot more as we go through the episode. So I guess the first question to you is, Day of the Devs took place early on in June. So have you watched this particular showcase before? And how does it compare for you to things like the Summer Game Fest or what was known as E3 previously?
So I haven't watched it before. I don't even know if I knew about it. But I'm very bad at watching these kind of shows because I'm always very behind the times when it comes to games, and secondly, because I don't like the anticipation of waiting for games coming out. So I prefer to look at them when they're finished, when they're out and about. But actually, quite a lot of these are out or coming out very soon. That was quite a nice surprise. I actually quite enjoyed it.
That's good to hear. I'm really glad because I really love watching it. When I discovered it, it was like a breath of fresh air for me, because suddenly a lot of the games I was sitting were ones that I would want to play, rather than ones that weren't aimed at me as a target audience. How do you feel about it, Matt?
Yeah, I thought it was quite sweet. I feel like the E3 left quite a gap in the market, which probably explains why there have been so many different game showcases over the summer. It just felt pleasant and not capitalistic-ish. I found really interesting recently. I've been trying to expand my creative horizons with the kind of games that I want to make, because I've always preferred playing fast-paced first-person shooters or third-person action games with the graphics getting better and better, and I assumed that even though a very quick glance at the Steam's most played list proves me wrong immediately, that the most popular games are the ones that fit into that very narrow mold of, say, a first-person shooter or a third-person action like God of War. But what games like Stardew Valley and Hades and Binding of Isaac Rebirth shows that there is a massive audience for very retro style games, even the art style of those games, which is something that had surprised me, because when you got to the PS2, that was when it became 3D time, and there was no looking back after that for me. But a load of the games on this list, ones that are 2D, 2.5D, the ones I find really impressive are the ones that look like a Pokemon game from 30 years ago that are 2D, and then it provides a really important alternative creative perspective on things, because people, it's very easy to think how I think. It's just, it needs to look amazing, it needs to be really fast, it needs to be really impressive, it needs to be something that no one's ever seen before, when these games prove that you need to have developed a very good game. You can't have any, because I saw somewhere, I think is very true, that games shouldn't be allowed to have good graphics for the next 10 years. And you're going to be forced to have PS2 graphics for the next 10 years. And then that'll force people to make games that are better games, which is clearly what they've been able to do here.
I have in my notes under the question I've just asked the phrase creativity and community, which is how they introduced Day of the Devs as a showcase. And I really think that runs through a lot of the games we're going to discuss, which leads me nicely on to my next question for you, which is, and I have a very long list for this one, which games from this year excited you the most and why?
I have to say that I really liked Big Walk. Such a nice idea, and I loved the fact that you went through this, you're walking through this world that looks like these high-end games, as you were talking about, Matt, and then you're like these funny little sort of stick-drawn little creatures with mouths and all very primary colours. And I mean, the look of it was just bonkers, but the meaning behind it and the whole idea behind it was excellent. So it's a multiplayer game, and you all go on a walk and you communicate with each other over voice chat. And the further you are away from each other, the harder it is to hear one another. Obviously, you're going somewhere, or you're trying to explore something. There is a meaning to the game in that respect, but they were also saying you can just hang out, you can just have a picnic, or you can just go and explore, you can go off on your own. And I just really like that idea, because in the real world, I think walking and talking is a really positive thing. I've actually doing something with other people where you can chat whilst you're doing it. So I think the same for crafting is something that I'm a big fan of, because I think it's very good for mental health, because it allows you to chat away without having to sit and look somebody straight in the eye, and that can be a bit intense. So walking is a great form of therapy, really, and walking with friends or walking with strangers and chatting to them, I think it's a lovely idea. And it felt like all of that thinking was in behind this particular game. So I just thought that really looked like unique and interesting concept, and yeah, that kind of hit me. I think that's what grabbed me, really, because that was the second game that they showcased. So I think the first game was a bit like, oh, okay. And then the second game, I was just like, what? This is crazy. What else is this program going to bring to my eyes? But yeah, I have quite a long list too, so I'm not going to ramble on with all of them. But yeah, that was probably the one that stood out. Oh, actually, the only other one that I think I would like to comment on that I thought was really intriguing was Relooted. Mm-hmm. because I thought the concept of that was excellent. It's about recovering relics that are in private, that were from African roots and then are now in private collections, and it's about recovering them. And it's been put together by an African studio, and it's just really nice to see something that just the concept was great, but also the actual gameplay looked amazing, because they had this whole thing of you plan your heist and you do that in a third party system and say, we're going to jump over here and we're going to go under that and we're going to go around there and we've got to avoid that alarm and all of that. And then you have to execute your plan. So it was multiple layers of different sort of game styles, which I think is really cool. And as somebody who cannot make up their mind about anything, I was really pleased to see that I think probably the majority of the games showcased were like that, were bringing in either multiple genres or they were bringing in multiple play styles. I really like that, because it means you get basically 2 games for the price of one, or 3 games for the price of one. Yeah.
Did you have anything to add, Matt?
Yes, I will admit that I have yet to break out of my addiction to the fast-paced. It doesn't need to be fast-paced, just that's like narrow mind fret that I've been in. So the key ones for me were 1, Sword of the Sea, which is the next, made by the studio that made Abzu and Journey. And I've seen that Austin Wintory is returning.
He is, yes.
So that's quite exciting. And those games have never been about graphics. They've been about feel and gameplay. Not necessarily gameplay, it's just feel. They're not the most complicated or intense, but they are incredibly impactful. Then Snap and Grab is quite cute. I've just looked at a description of it. It said, this game is described as a photography-based heist game where players need to be gay and do crimes.
Yeah.
I didn't realise if that was a critical part of it.
As well.
So that's good. And then just the third one. Moonlighters 2, The Endless Vault looked a bit sweet. I've been playing Fallout 4 recently. Finally played Fallout New Vegas, Fallout 3, and now replaying Fallout 4. And you can build your own settlements in Fallout 4. And I have such an itch to be scratched there in that kind of building, just constructing a civilization thing. And I have yet to find the perfect place for me to go and just make something. Because I've had Fallout is good for one way, but then I tried that townscaping game, and then that was too small scale,
too far.
And I feel it. I feel the right one out there, and I like this. And with each of these ones, with most of the games on this list, they take a specific concept and then they explore that one concept. They're not trying to sell you loads of things inside the game. They're not trying to justify a £70 game. They're going, I've got this idea of, I want to be a photographer who's also a thief and a heist master. Or I want to go and return stolen artifacts to their countries of origin. Then just go, that's a good idea. We'll see what happens if we make a game with that. And again, like you said, with the fewer resources you have, the more creative you have to be. And
So basically what I did in preparation for this episode was go through every games that was showcased and put them into a list. So I wanted to give a shout out to each of them, and I'll try and be as quick as possible. And I will also give a shout out to each of the developers as well. So if anyone's interested, they can go and find them and check them out. So definitely the first three that were showcased. So that's Snap and Grab by No Goblin and Annapurna, Big Walk by House House, and The Sea by Giant Squid. Those were immediately on my I would like to play these list. Snap and Grab is actually set in the 1980s, so I hope it has an 80s soundtrack. That would be really fun to play with while you're plotting your heist of various artifacts or art pieces. What's fun is that you have to also plan around like all the security as well. It's similar to Relooted in that way, but it's a lot more sort of cartoon-esque, 3D, animated, exaggerated caricature style. Very much colour, lots of colour, very 80s vibes, and you're also being hunted by a detective as well. But it looks like a good fun, a nice little fun game to give a try, definitely. And we know that Annapurna is a very good games developer because they've done lots of games that we've played, things like Stray. I can't think of any others, but they'll come to me. They did actually have some involvement in 2OT, which we had a recent episode on as well. Big Walk by House House. House House also developed Untitled Goose Game. I don't know if you have played that one, but I think it's brilliant. I wondered also, since the studio is based in Australia, whether Big Walk could also be tied into the concept of the Aboriginal Big Walk, which I think was one of the focal points of the film Australia. Again, very surface level knowledge based on a film that I saw, but I feel like in Aboriginal culture, they go on a big walk, and then when they come back, they're like a man or woman, or it's like a passage that they go on a walk and then come back like several months later, go out into the bush. So I feel like that's maybe linked to some of the stuff that you'd be doing in Big Walk, or at least the wider concept. But I think Big Walk is, as Jem mentioned, a lot about just connecting with people and talking and spending time hanging out, which is, we've discussed on the pod a lot about the social aspects of gaming and how gaming is a lifeline for people to connect to people that live far away from them or that they can't see very often. And it certainly had, that's why it had such an explosion during the pandemic as well. So I really think that would be a really fun game to explore as a concept. It also, at points, had you using certain signals, and also you can also type if you don't want to use your voice to communicate as well. So that's definitely worth checking out, I think. Sort of the Sea, I've talked multiple times on the pod about how big a fan I am of Johnny and Absy, so this one's just straight on there. I think it's a combination of both, but also mixed in with some sort of surfing and skateboarding and snowboarding type gameplay through the genes and all the various bits. So I feel like it's one you can tune out to and chill out with. So that one's very nice. Other notable mentions I have Dose of Divas by Outer Loop. I think the plot centres around a sort of turn-based combat where you're on the side of cooking meals from scratch and having nice nutritious food, and you're battling your sister who is running an empire of processed ready meals, which is, again, quite a fun concept to explore. I put this next one in brackets because I don't think I will play it, but I love the concept. It's something called Please Watch the Artwork, and it's a psychological horror spot the difference game based on real artwork. I think, is it Hopper, the one that did Copy Shop in America? And there's like abnormalities going on with each of the pictures, and you have to basically spot where there's a ghost or a poltergeist or some things have moved in the picture, stuff like that. But it's about getting you to look at the artwork and appreciate it on that level. But as a concept, I think it's very cool. And it's all to do with you being, I don't know if you're an employee or what, but it's involved with the Museum of, I've forgotten what the abbreviation is, but it's MoMA instead of MoMA, which is in New York and various other places. And that's by Studio Waterzooey. So that's definitely one to check out if you're into spooky games. I think it's coming out near Halloween. Relooted, as Jem mentioned, that very much appealed to me because of my background in museums and heritage. Repatriation has been a problem since, became much more into focus while I was studying my MA in collections care. because of the whole thing over the Elgin marbles, whether they should be returned to Greece. But it's a big problem for collections with origins in non-European countries. Oftentimes when they've been taken back to these European countries, they probably have been stolen or looted, or that their kind of origins haven't been noted properly. And indeed, the people looking after them are not from those cultures, so they're going to interpret them in a way that doesn't pay proper homage to the importance of the objects. And we had a couple of objects of African origin actually in the college where I was studying. And while I was working there, we tried really hard to give some context to the fact that we didn't know how these had come to West End, and we had to treat them like with the right tone and talk about it as probably an object that shouldn't probably be there, but that is, and that this is how we're looking after them at the moment, kind of thing. So I definitely am 100% on board with the concept, and the gameplay, as you mentioned, Jem, looks really fun as well. So that's definitely one I'll be looking into. Other things I had noted. Thick as Thieves is a kind of multiplayer stealth game, which claims to be doing something new with the stealth genre. So that'll be quite interesting to check out. One particular trailer I really liked, Consume Me. The developers for that one, they didn't actually have a studio name. It's just Jenny and AP, but they were really funny. And it's all about Jenny's life in high school. You're role-playing as her, juggling all the various tasks in her life, trying to stay fit, trying to keep on top of all of her social activities, walking her dog, trying to stay in a relationship, basically being a young woman, but as a role-playing game. And it was just really funny looking, and it looked really like a good time. And I'm definitely going to be very interested in that one. So I think it centres largely around managing diet, hence the title Consume Me, but it also factors in lots of other things about being a teenage girl or a young person leaving school and trying to get out into the big wide world and all the pressures that there are on women. So I definitely think it would be a very relevant game for the pod to look at. A couple more in my interested list. Tire Boy by Game Team 6. To me, that kind of gave me Elden Ring and Zelda vibes, but you're a tire with some legs and arms and a stick. It's pretty crazy, but it looks quite fun. And all the things in the world, like there were some really large animals, so it gave you that sense of scale that actually you're about this big, and all the animals are about this big. So it looked quite fun. And then Toem 2, which I have played the first original Toem, and that's by Something We Made. And they've made it 3D instead of 2D, and you can now jump and climb and stuff. But it's mainly about taking photos, so it's based around photography, and it's just very chilled out. What about games that maybe weren't so interesting to us, and why? Did you have any of those listed?
You both really liked the first one, Snap. What was it? Snap
and Grab. Yeah.
Snap and Grab. I really didn't. I didn't like that at all. I didn't like the graphics. It just screamed mobile game at me. And I just really was like, whoa, I'm not into this at all. Maybe I just have something against the 80s. I don't know. It just reminded me of the Barbie cartoons that my daughter used to watch. I can see that appeals to a certain group, but it felt like it stuck outside of a lot of the other games in the showcase. I was also really bemused by Tire Boy.
Yeah. It's quite an old one, isn't it? Yeah.
When I was in Cologne, we went to the Museum of Modern Art there, and they had a display where the photographer had gone and filmed children playing in different parts of the world. And just to talk about the way that children play and how it varies depending on the country that you might be in, but also about how children play with the environment that they're in or the friends that they have. And one of the videos, the one that was quite poignant, was this video of this little boy who, and I can't remember where he was, but he went up a slag heap with a tyre all the way up to the top. And then he climbed into the tyre and rolled down. It was massive. It was huge. And there was this video of this tiny little boy walking up, and he must have been about 7 or 8.
Wow.
He wasn't old, and it was just such a dangerous thing to do as well. Those kind of mountains, and they're not structurally safe. So when I saw this, that was what I thought of, and it just made me feel a little bit sad, actually. So the note I wrote on it was, how much is the tyre a part of the story, or something quirky that they've added in to make the game stand out? Because much of the rest of the game, when they described it, sounded like other games that we've seen before. So that sort of, it didn't really, it definitely made an impression on me, but I didn't think, I want to go play that. The other one that I don't even think I paid any attention to it at all was the Marvel.
Yeah. Same.
That came on, and I was just like, I don't know why we're even talking about this, because it feels like such a big name, that it felt like it shouldn't have been within that group of games.
Yeah.
But I will caveat what I have just said by saying that there was something for everyone in that set of games, and it just goes to show how much skill and talent and inspiration there is within the indie industry. And we've talked before about how indie games are becoming a force to be reckoned with when it comes to the industry as a whole, and AAA games are not necessarily holding their own. And Matt said at the start, it's not all about getting better, that there is actually a lot to be said for having a really good idea, a really good concept, and executing that really well. It's not all about having the fancy graphics and the special effects. So
this is why there should be investment from somewhere in studios making indie games. I'm pretty sure that Epic Games does this because when a studio makes a game in the Unreal Engine, Epic Games gets a percentage of the sales from that game, and they give just grants to independent creators. The big gaming companies should do it as well, because if they're only focused on things like Madden and FIFA and Call of Duty, they're the only things that they want to focus on. Whereas if you fund 1,000 indie games, like 99% of them will sell 1,000 copies, but then you might get one which turns out to be Animal Crossing, and then all of a sudden you're absolutely filthy rich from another area. And I think it's the difference in price between AAA and indie now has grown so much that it is driving people towards these indie titles, and it's making the indie titles better, because all of a sudden people are going, we're going to spend money on an indie title. How do we choose which one it is? And then because there are more options, you've got to be better. And I was surprised both pleasantly and unpleasantly the other day, because I've done such a good job of avoiding anything about Death Stranding, is I completely, utterly missed that it came out a few days ago. I saw there's been a lot of stuff going on, and then I checked on Google or something, and it said, oh yeah, it comes out tomorrow. And so that was a surprise, but then the stuff around that. And then I looked at the price, and it is £70.
Yeah.
And I am mortally disappointed with the publishers for that, because when Elden Ring came out, it was £55. When Black Myth Wukong came out, it was £55. Some big game studios are making these games that take 4 or 5 years and still releasing them at £55, because that is reasonable. I'm happy to do that, and especially if it's a game that I love. Every game that I have bought for £55 and played, I have thought this is worth more than that. I'm getting every penny out of that. Whereas it's so rare for games that are £70 to go, it was fully worth that.
We hope you enjoyed that episode of Gaming the System. If you want to support us, you can donate to us through our PayPal by sending it to wearegamingthesystem@gmail.com if you want to send us a one-off donation. If you want to donate to us monthly, you can subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/gamingthesystem. Until next time, bye-bye.